And here was Mr. Soliman, who I would have to think, he tried to get a gun, he wouldn't, but there was some connection. He knew that there was a special emotional resonance with burning Jews, and that's what he tried to do, except the only difference between him and the satanic people at Auschwitz or Treblinka is he tried to burn them alive. And yet his lawyer was suggesting that he was a victim and that the people who were trying to stop this family, and him in particular, were somehow Hitlerian, when the Hitlerian person was him.
Hello, ladies. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor is the Martin and Ely Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution, the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. He is a military historian, a classicist, a philologist, a farmer, professor. I don't know what you're not, Victor. Everything.
The hardest of all is farming.
Yeah.
Much harder than being a professor or even a writer. It's the hardest thing in the world.
Someone put a picture of you, someone yesterday on Twitter, maybe it was today, a picture of you from one of your earliest books of you on the farm in a very dirty outfit.
Yeah, that was a New York photographer for the Free Press.
Okay.
Oh, no, you know what excuse me. That was Jane Smiley wrote a review she wrote a review of a book that I wrote. It wasn't The Other Greeks. It was Fields Without Dreams. And it was very complimentary. She later hated my guts and wanted to retract her preface to The Land Was Everything. But Fields Without Dreams is about losing money and farming, all the people I met. And they sent this photographer out. And as I remember, I picked her up at the Fresno Air Terminal, but I was working on the farm. And so I got off a tractor, drove up, got her, and then I said, I will get dressed. Just stay here outside. She said, no, you got to be like this. So I just took it like that.
Yeah. Well, if that was an everyday picture of you, I would just think, oh my gosh, what does it mean to be a farmer?
I was in when I was 25, I got my PhD, I came back, and I did not cut my hair or shave for about a year. And then I just farmed the whole time. And I looked at my Social Security. I always do that when they see, your prior salaries. Do you ever get that thing?
Yes.
And 1980 was 6,100, 7,200, 4,500. But it was kind of a good time. We had canned, dried, we had all these canned food we had dried tomatoes for the year, we did all that stuff. We dried all of our apricots, our figs, and we preserved them and lived on nothing. I had about 5 cars. I had a 1970 V6 Dodge pickup. I had a 1964 Volvo. I had a 1968 Ranchero, remember those? And it had a 289 V8 in it. I had my dad bought a wreck for me. It was a Pontiac Le Mans 1972. So I had like 4, and I also had a 1967 Buick Riviera that my uncle sold to me for $2,000. I paid him off by the month. And I had all these cars here. I had 5 of them. And then when one would go bad, I would use the other. And then there was always 2 that weren't working. And there was a lot of guys that on the farm that were really good mechanics, and I learned a lot from them. So I kind of, I would change generators and carburetors, but I got them all running. And then one day, my wife and 3 kids were in a country town, Reedley, and it was like 105, and the car broke down on the railroad track as they were passing. And it was that huge Electra boat. So I said, that's it. And I liquidated all of them for maybe, $900. And then I went out and bought a Mazda van on credit. That was the first new car I'd had.
Your life would have been so much easier as a farmer if you had only followed the Michael Bloomberg
drop a seed. What do you say? Drop a
Stick your
seed.
finger in the ground.
Drop a seed. Yeah, I wrote
Yeah.
about. I was merciless to him when I said that. When I see these guys farming, you talk to them. They are expert welders. They are expert mechanics. They are expert truck drivers. They are expert tractor drivers. They are expert agronomists. They're expert accountants. They're financial planners. They're, you talk to them. The guys that really know what they're doing. It's something, and gosh, I'm not talking about the corporate agribusiness. Those guys are smart too, but I'm just talking about the guy that does everything on his own property. And there's not very many left of them. Kind of like independent truck drivers. Those guys that have their own truck.
My father
and they know how to
one.
fix it, and they know they have little calculators in their mind about the price of gas and the price it costs them per mile per the load.
Which they also, on top of it, every state, they had to buy the amount of gas for that state.
They know everything.
So if you were driving halfway across the country, you had to juggle all these numbers.
I used to talk to those guys that would transport fruit all the way from California to the New York supermarkets, and they would tell me about the idiosyncratic state gas prices, rules, how much it was costing them, where they slept, which truck stop. But they had it all down to the bottom line.
Yeah.
Anytime you have somebody who's independent like that, they're really valuable in a consensual society, because you need at least a minority of the population outspoken, eccentric, self-employed.
Right.
That was what was weird about Trump, is that he had that background that he had dealt with. No offense about your home city, Jack, but crooked politicians, crooked social activists, crooked environmentalists, crooked city politicians, crooked union, all of them.
Right.
And how to build a building with dealing with all those people, I don't know, but he did.
He did. Yeah, they couldn't fix the rink at Central Park. He said, give me, he did it in like 5 minutes. Hey, Victor, we're going to stick to agriculture and actually agro-terrorism. We had tried in our previous recording, I had said we're going to talk about this Chinese communist madness, and Gordon Chang had some thoughts. So we're going to get your thoughts on that, Victor. We have, hopefully we got a lot of things to talk about. High-speed rail in California. Douglas Murray has a great column on leftists, martyrs, and University of Florida. A big to-do down there with the election of a president. So we'll get to all these things. First with the Chi-Com efforts to kill us by food, or kill our food, when we come back from these initial important messages. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. I don't think I mentioned your website, The Blade of Perseus, victorhanson.com. Later on, I'll tell you why you should be subscribing. Victor, also, I'm not sure, I think maybe you possibly talked about this a little with the great Sammy Wink, but Gordon Chang, who is I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners know him. He's on Fox a lot. He writes a lot, writes for the Epoch Times, all sorts of
places. He's on our military history working group, too, at the Hoover Institution.
That's right. He writes for Strategica.
Yeah, he writes a lot. He's been one of our foundational members.
Yeah. Well, here's a piece on Fox News about these Chinese students smuggling in this bioterrorism. And a couple of things quickly. He says, they should be sent to Guantanamo Bay. They're terrorists. But he also makes a larger point that what this is evidence of to him is a de facto people's war. People's war is a very specific thing to China, but against the U.S. I mean, I think essentially saying they're at war with us.
Yeah, well, he used that term, and that was specifically to the Maoist revolution against the Chiang Kai-shek government, and it denotes the idea there's no separation between civilian and military, that it's the people who each, according to their task and ability, enlist in the noble cause. So what he's saying is that, I'm just extrapolating here, but whether or not these two, and they had formerly been, I think, students at the University of Michigan, and they had lab rights there. And I think one of them was still an employee, and then the girlfriend fled back to China, but they were introducing this deadly fungus that was kind of like a Last of Us scenario that would destroy wheat and grain, soy, and other staple crops of the heartland of America, but it was also toxic to humans, liver damage, etc. And they were implanting it in hopes that they would cause famine. And his point was it was kind of irrelevant not irrelevant, but you don't really have to ascertain the fingerprints of the Chinese Communist Party on that operation, because when people leave China to come here and when they depart here to go back, they are interrogated by the Chinese Communist Party. And all the information they glean by statute, they are compelled to divulge what they know about the United States, and they are briefed before they get here. And in many cases, that creates a kind of a freelancing, independent, I'm going to get points with the Communist Party. And they think up plans on their own, which are usually coordinated, but not always. And there's always a subtext to the Chinese balloon story, or there's always a subtext to this. And we've discussed it about 12 miles from here in Reedley, California. We had a city build its small town, agro town, and a person was driving by connected with the government, city government. He saw some leak out of a packing house. It was where I had actually worked for a few weeks when I was 17. Lo and behold, they went in there, and the first thing they saw was, I think, 200 dead lab-engineered rats. Those are engineered rats, so they have the same DNA as human lungs and stuff, so they can experiment. And then they found these vials of, gosh, they were malaria, they were COVID, they were every toxic chemical, and it was, quote unquote, a Chinese affiliated company that was supposed to be competing with vaccination contracts, but it didn't sound like that. And they had been boarded up in Fresno, and they had fled to what they felt would be an obscure location in a rural community. But here in this very safe, stable Reedley, which is a wonderful town, my wife is from Reedley, and it was, my gosh, they had a toxic biochemical lab basically right in the middle of it, run by a Chinese national with a checkered financial and maybe criminal history. And it was kind of like these agro-terrorists. And then just about a month ago, Jack, the Stanford Review ran a series of articles. That's the conservative newspaper. They were brilliant journalistic pieces by students, and they basically interrogated Chinese students. And Stanford, like Harvard, has about 25 to 30% of the students are foreign nationals. And there had been stories, as you know, that the Kennedy School of Government, it was kind of ironic, they trained many of the Chinese Communist Party apparat. And we've had people that go over to China and they remark that they see these Chinese people brag about their perfect English and they compete with each other. I went to Harvard. No, I went to Brown. I went to Stanford, that kind of American snobbery. But they're diehard communists, and they come over here as children of the apparat to be educated and pay 110% tuition, room, and board, make about $400 million a year for Harvard. But at Stanford is even more dangerous because we are located, in a large Chinese American community where they feel they can blend in and not be detected, the espionage element, small percentage, but a large number in actual numbers. And then in addition to that, they have the protection of the campus, and then they are sitting next to $9 trillion in market capitalization of Silicon Valley. So they have all this technology they can appropriate. And the bottom line, this investigative series of articles in the Stanford Review, was they interviewed people, and they basically said, yeah, there's students at Stanford, and we are engaged in technological theft and espionage. And they explained why, and they were debriefed when they get back, and they were prepped before they came. And this was juxtaposed to the Stanford's history we had, as I said on an earlier broadcast, a few years ago, not much years ago, but a few, I think 6 years ago, we had a People's Liberation Army colonel who was a visiting professor of neuropsychiatry or something and was outed. And then we had a Confucius Institute that was a hub. And then we had several $1 million of Chinese gifting that was not fully reported to the Betsy DeVos Department of Education. And this poses this question. There's over 1 million foreign students in the United States. And given the selectivity of our elite campuses in business programs, in PhD programs, in medical school, in law school, in government programs, why are we privileging these people from illiberal, autocratic, and anti-American regimes? They can be from Iran, they can be from the West Bank, they can be from Gaza, they can be from Syria, they can be from Iraq, they can be from communist China. Why are we bringing these people here? And the answer is they pay a premium and they are a money-making source of revenue for these elite universities. And more importantly, they bring with them a hostile anti-Americanism, at least maybe not individually, but their home nations insist upon it, kind of dovetails with the ideology present on the campuses. And so this is a very emotional issue, because when Donald Trump talks to Harvard or Stanford or any of these campuses about the danger of unaudited foreign students from illiberal regimes, and the twofer that happens, A, they appropriate scientific knowledge or government secrets, and B, they being maybe 1% of a million, 10,000 maybe, or maybe 5%. And then second, they go back with that expertise and use that expertise in government that is hostile to the U.S. And why are we doing this when we have all this talent here that would love to go to Harvard Business School or Stanford Law School or, the PhD program in physics and stuff? And I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Maybe
I don't understand
a little...
And that what I just said, if you say that, then you are dubbed a nativist, xenophobe, protectionist. You're just pilloried and caricatured. But it's a real problem. It really is.
I think it has a more acute sense that even at a state university here in Connecticut, University of Connecticut, probably not the percentage of students from China as there are at Stanford or Harvard, but I don't know, Victor, my taxes are paying for this school system in this state. I would like to think there is a benefit of the doubt for the students of this state to go to the University of Connecticut. But you're right. If they're paying full freight from China, they're going to take the money.
I won't mention the university I taught as a visiting professor a few years back for a number of years, and the person who hired me is no longer alive. So it's not a reference to the current administration of this particular university. That's wonderful. And this guy was a wonderful person. But I was teaching a graduate seminar, and I had maybe 50% of the class are mainland Chinese students, and very affluent. And the idea that I could go over to China, even if I'd spent 5 years trying to learn Mandarin and compete, and it would be impossible for me. And I'm supposedly a linguist or a philologist, but so they didn't have good English capability. So when I gave a test, they would just naturally, under exam conditions, just group together, right? And they would just discuss things in Chinese. And I would have to break them up and say, no, you can't do that. And they said, well, we're Chinese. And I said, you can't do that. And then I would go talk to the administrator, and he said, my hands are tied. These people pay a premium room, board, and tuition. And so I liked them all, but they were just oblivious. It was like, and you could tell that they were very, very wealthy and entitled. And they were not going to listen to some peon professor tell them they couldn't do this.
Yeah.
And then this administrator said to me, well, Victor, do you feel that their collaborative effort increases their score? I said, no. I mean, they have so much linguistic difficulties that you're talking about some person getting an F, some person getting a C minus and D, and then basically it was, could you give them a C plus or B minus? So that was disturbing. And then I came to like a couple. I never understood, by the way, whether they were brother and sister or boyfriend and girlfriend or operative agents or what, but they were just inseparable. But they would come for advice, and they would say to me, this is a very dangerous place. Could you, and they had a little map on their phone and said, point out the places that you wouldn't go to in Los Angeles. I just said I wouldn't go to any of them myself. But then they wanted to know which car they should buy. And they asked me to compare the BMW, the Range Rover, and the Mercedes.
Oh, nice.
And I said I had no idea they were out of my... And then like a week later, the young woman drove up in a beautiful Mercedes and asked me, and she said, I really want to thank you for picking this out. I said, I didn't say anything. I said, they were beyond my pay. And she said, well, I was going to buy a Mercedes and you didn't object. So I thought that was approval. But my point was, I said, well, how do you afford this? And she said, my father is a very important man in China, in our province, provincial official. And so you get the impression there's a lot of people that from the Middle East and from China that are not representative of those countries, that they mirror image the elite of American. And but the difference is that our elite come out of a consensual society, and their elite, to be an elite, have to cut deals with autocratic governments. And they're basically owned by those governments. And they're here not on private money, but on money that's either quote unquote public or extorted from the public.
Uyghurs working
it's
for
not
nothing.
healthy. It's not healthy. And I'm not a xenophobe or anything, but there's no reason why you would have 20 to 30% of the population at these very elite graduate programs and even undergraduate when you have 340 million Americans, and a lot of them are underprivileged, and they would do just as well on competitive SAT or GRE or LSAT or MSAT. So I just don't understand it. I don't. It's just baffling. And this is what you get. University of Michigan affiliated agro-terrorists, or Stanford PLA operatives, or our Fang who came up to my office and told me, as I remember, and I want to be careful because somebody should check it, but as I remember, she told me I think she graduated from Cal State Hayward, because she had a Valley Girl accent she turned down like that after a halting American accent. I saw the other day, just in reference to Fang, who was kind of the flack for the San Francisco consulate and was a busybody, apparently, because that's what she informed me, that she went to all the political organizations, meetings in the Bay Area. But did you see where Eric Swalwell was referencing her, and he said he was proud of that? Did he say that?
No, I saw him being commented on, but
he said something that he was not ashamed of his liaison or something.
Yeah.
God, he's a buffoon. Charlemagne the God really kind of tore into him. Isn't that a contrast between the two?
I think he's more famous for having a flatulence at a public hearing, but
he's sort of a refined version of Tim Walz.
Yes. Victor, my son, one of my sons at UConn, all my kids graduated from UConn, all 5 of them, but one of them did have as a roommate as a freshman a kid who was the son of a mayor of a Chinese city with over 1 million population. I have a feeling it's probably 100 cities like that. But he was such a brat, this kid. He was so entitled. And they had this... I asked him when we were moving in, well, tell me about what do you do? And you have any family? I have an uncle. I go see, we see our uncle every weekend in the stores, Connecticut. And in hindsight, I'm thinking it had to have been the handler for all the Chinese.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand it. During the Cold War, when we were in an existential rivalry with Russia, we did not have Russian students over here, nor did we send a lot of Americans over there. I think there's only 12,000 American students in China right now. So why don't Mr. Garber, the president of Harvard, why doesn't he just look in the mirror and say, mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me why there's 30% of our population are foreign students, and we have a high number in the Kennedy School of Government and our graduate programs from communist China, and to what degree they are connected or not with the Chinese Communist Party. Because if he doesn't ask himself that, then could he at least say, is Harvard or Stanford partly culpable for the 1 million Uyghurs,
right? Absolutely,
that are being tortured and encamped in this facility as slave laborers? Or are they partly culpable for the destruction of independent Tibetan culture? Johnny, what's his name in Hong Kong? That we just honored at
Jimmy Lai.
Jimmy Lai. Are they responsible for suppression of free speech that had been a commodity of Hong Kong until the communists expropriated, or the lease ran out in Hong Kong? Any of these things, and not to mention the Silken Road or the Belt Initiative, where they're exploiting third world people, or this racist country that would not, they have certain racial laws and exclusions. Do you feel that Harvard or Stanford, that you are contributing to this when you come over here and profit on educating the children of this communist apparat, or for that matter, the Iranian theocrats, or for that matter, people in Gaza that promote Hamas, this terrorist organization, you feel, or Lebanon that promote and follow and are part of Hezbollah? Do you feel any
Yeah, especially if you're into disinvestment in Israel. If you can be about that and you're not about disinvestment in China, something's quite out of whack there.
It's insidious, and it's going to destroy this country until we get wise about it. It's another thing about Donald Trump. People, they can say all they want about him, but until he arrived on the political scene, the basic attitude was laissez-faire. We're going to let our corporate entrepreneurial class go into China and get joint partnerships, and they're going to make a lot of money. And the fact that after about 8 years, the Chinese are going to master that joint venture, expropriate it, steal the money, and then get the technology is okay, because the wealthier they are and the more entrepreneurial they are, they will develop into a consensual society. They will have the Western affluenza, they used to call it, and they will be consensual. That is completely discredited at every element of what I just said. And all that close corporate partnership did was enrich a bunch of oligarchic, aristocratic, dictatorial, Orwellian people. And they do horrendous damage throughout. They pollute everything that they get involved in. The World Health Organization, the origins of COVID, you name it. In fact, you could argue that the Chinese are responsible for more American death than all the Americans lost in World War II. If you accept that 1 million people died of COVID, and there's somewhere between 10 and 15 million people that still have debilitating illnesses, long COVID, side effects from it. And they don't take any culpability, and we don't hold them to account.
Has gotten hold of some of Anthony Fauci's devices, phones, at least phones, maybe, and they'll be delving into that to see where his fingerprints are on any of this. I don't know.
Boy, you think that the day after he discovered that the virus was not only in Wuhan, but it was starting to spread to Europe and the United States, and he had that frenzied exchange, remember, with Francis Collins?
Right.
Basically, we have to be very careful how we present this, because they might blame us for circumventing the laws against gain in function research by going to Peter Daszak at EcoHealth, and we had basically that's what he was doing. But there must have been conversations about that off the record, and those were beyond. Would he be foolish enough to do it on his government phone? And I can tell you one thing, I know Kash Patel, and he's not the sort who's going to do a James Comey and say, this would be too controversial, or I might be self-incriminated, so we'll just kind of lose it somewhere.
Yeah.
No, it'll be released.
There may be
released to a congressional committee.
Yeah. There may not be full-fledged Kraken or even baby Kraken, but at least we'll have some info there. Hey, Victor, sticking to higher ed, the University of Florida has just gone through this drama. Okay. The former president of the we just talked about, the University of Michigan, Santa Ono, who was a real lefty up there, for whatever the hell reason.
I didn't understand that story at all.
Yeah. Let me tell you.
In Canada and the United States, he had a record of being a DEI extremist.
Yeah.
Why would the University of Florida make him the finalist? And thank God for the board.
He was the sole finalist.
I know it.
But thankfully, the state, there's some other state body overseeing that nuked it. In part, I think Governor Rick Scott and some others started. So what the hell are we doing here? This guy's a DEI
I don't
maven.
know. At the Bradley Awards 2 weeks ago in Washington, I sat at one of the pre-award dinners that Bradley put on. We honored the recipients, and I was at the table with Chris Rufo, and people were politely disagreeing with him about the Trump efforts with Harvard and saying that Trump may or may not being too intrusive. And at one point he turned to me and said, am I right or wrong? And I kind of weighed in extremely pro-Chris. But I listened to him.
A brand name to protect, Victor.
Yes, but he's doing very valuable work, and he's paying a huge price, as he recited at the awards, that people have gone after his family. They've sued him. He's taking on the whole left-wing progressive project. And DEI is their heart and arteries of the whole system. And for him to go right after it, and the story's not over yet with DEI.
No.
Everybody's announced prematurely its epitaph, but
Well,
there's so many people invested in it, it's going to be very hard to get rid of.
Harmeet Dillon, who was also at
Jeez.
I mean, she's got everybody in their crosshairs. It's amazing.
It's amazing how the Trump people were able to draw on the knowledge of all these people. Harmeet Dillon, I would not want to cross her because she's very learned in the law. She's very used to suing people on behalf of people's civil rights. And as a prosecutor, she knows exactly what people are doing. And more importantly, she knows exactly how they hide what they're doing.
Yeah, yes. Well, we have a Rhode Island judge who's doing hinky things to get your take on. Douglas Murray has I think, a very important column to get your, again, also to get your take on, Victor. And how about we'll get to those when we come back from these important messages.
I would like to take a moment to welcome a new sponsor, Vibrance. The ingredients in Vibrance Super C Serum can replace your day creams, night creams, wrinkle creams, neck creams, and even dark spot reducers. Made in USA of the highest quality ingredients, including vitamin C, hyaluronic acid, vitamin B5, and vitamin E, Super C Serum delivers noticeable results. Simplify your skincare routine. Get a healthier complexion and minimize wrinkles and age spots with Vibrance. And if you don't find it better than your current skincare routine, you'll get a full refund. Go to Vibrance.com/Victor and save up to 37% and free shipping. That's Vibrance, Vibrance, Vibrance.com/Victor. I used it for the first time the other day, and it made my skin immediately feel softer and moister. What a difference.
We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show, recording on Saturday, June 7th, and this episode will be up on Thursday the 12th, and I hope on Thursday the 12th, Victor himself will be nicely recovering from
I will be
his
nicely
Roto-Rooter
yes.
episode.
My Roto-Rooter will be over with.
Oh, breathy.
4
Victor's
months
got
of pounding will be gone.
to take
Not
you.
immediately.
Well, the swelling must go down.
I've had it done before, and the aftermath for the first days are worse than the days before, but it alleviates quickly.
Well, Victor's got a website, folks, I mentioned earlier, The Blade of Perseus. Consider subscribing. In fact, do subscribe. It's $6.50 a month, discounted $65 for the full year. And why you would do that is because there's so much that is offered on the site. Links to Victor's articles, weekly essay for American Greatness, weekly syndicated column, books, these podcasts, other appearances. But Victor twice a week writes an exclusive article for The Blade of Perseus and cuts an exclusive video. And if you're a VDH fan, you will want it. So do subscribe. Or Father's Day is coming up. I think it will make a great Father's Day present for your husband, your uncle, your father, whatever. So do think about that. And also, I said links to books. I mean, if Dad's a military historian buff, go look at, get the Second World Wars. I mean, I think that would be an award-winning Father's Day gift. So, Victor, here's a headline. Major Democrat donor became judge ruling against Trump. That's a weird headline, but anyway, a federal judge who has ruled twice to halt executive actions by President Donald Trump previously gave about $500,000 in campaign contributions to Democrat. The judge, U.S. District Judge John McConnell of the District of Rhode Island, will also preside over yet another case involving Trump. That case, by the way, Victor, involves sanctuary city status. So this guy, I know I've been talking too much and I'll shut up in a second, but one of the greatest federal judges of our lifetime was the late James Buckley. And he was a friend, a dear friend. I love Jim. God rest his soul. But I remember, even as a 90-something years old senior status judge, He left his house. Actually, he had a house on the Buckley estate up in Connecticut, and his sister Priscilla lived in the main house, and she had a political event there. And even though Jim didn't live in that house, because he lived in a house on the estate, he left the property because he thought there could be absolutely no connection between a federal judge and any sense of fundraising or any sense of
My
politics.
mother was a Superior Court judge of Fresno County, and then I think she was the second female state appellate court judge, and she would not discuss any case if I asked her about it. Absolutely not. And then she gave all of us a code of behavior, and she said, if you drink and you drive, not because it wasn't that it's going to embarrass me, but it's illegal. It's illegal. It's illegal. And tax, you are not to. I remember I said, well, I'm a professor, Mom, and I have a little crappy little office. I made it out of plywood and everything. I think I'm going to write off the plywood. No. You're not full-time farming. That is an illegal write-off, and I don't want you audited. So it was. I really thought I was kind of paranoid about that. And I think that's important. But there's about 750, as I understand it, the lowest rung. I'm not making fun of that judge. It's very important. The district judge because they're set up regionally. The Ninth District that's a circuit judge. Circuit judges, but they are set up regionally, unlike the Supreme Court. But this idea that what was occasional or episodic in the past, that you sued to stop an administration, and the Republicans did it, but not. There has been more lawsuits right now in the first 130 days against Trump to district judges than the whole Biden 4 years put together. And this was all pre-planned. That Mark Elias and all the Democratic operatives and the Soros Fund and their affiliates, all that money was set to, as they say, pounce the moment Trump took office. So you have about 750 judges, probably 450 are left-wing, and their rulings, their scores on the liberal index are all known to this, and they are cherry-picked. And they just trade places. Use Judge X, Judge Y, Judge Z. We used him last week, we'll use this guy. And then these people feel that given whom they associate with and given the media that interviews them or the situations, that they will be iconic if they rule and stop the evil orange Donald Trump, orange man. And that's what they do. And they know they're going to eventually be either reversed or stayed because they overshot their jurisdictions and their authority. But basically, for now, the most powerful people in the United States are these 450 judges who can stop an elected president and stay all of his executive orders, everything, in a way that we've never seen before.
If this guy was a Republican and the shoe was on the other foot, do you think we'd be hearing calls for impeachment?
Well, we do. We have a good example of that because the judge in the E. Jean Carroll case was left-wing, and he was the one that fined Donald Trump, I think, $83 million. And then Judge Engoron in the Letitia James case was a Democratic liberal judge, and he fined, originally it was $450 million. I think the appellate court reduced it down to $370 million. That's still on the books. He's appealing that. And then we had Engoron, then we had Judge Merchan, remember him? And his daughter was a Democratic, made a fortune trading off his name, and that was was that the Alvin Bragg case? And then we had one kind of slightly conservative justice, I forgot her name, and the Jack Smith, and everybody got angry. Remember that? And they said, she is a Trump operative. In other words, their whole ideology was that all the judges have to be Democratic supporters, if not donors. They all have to be partisan. And if anyone isn't, then he's a Trump sellout, and we should object to that. And that's what they're doing. And I don't know how you stop it. The Supreme Court, I think, will step in at some point and say, You're not going to cherry pick district court judges. And if you do cherry pick them, their rulings are not going to apply to 340 million people outside their jurisdiction. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen.
I think
But
you
we'll
have
see.
to gain a supermajority in Republicans in the
Yeah.
House and Senate to then pass a bill to restrict what areas federal judges, which they're entitled to do. You can restrict the judiciary, but it has to come from a congressional law.
It does. And what we're seeing is a titanic struggle, everybody, from what people want, the popular mood in the country on all these issues, and that reflection of that popular mood in control of the House and Senate, the presidency, and to a lesser extent the Supreme Court, and the institutional resistance for causes that are unpopular and antithetical to what people want. And that's the courts, the administrative state, the foundations, K through 12, higher education, the media, and they don't have any popular support, but they have enormous institutional power. And they check what the popular elected president wants to do in a popular elected Congress. And they have insidious ways. And those they can raid Mar-a-Lago. They can try to get Trump's name off the ballot. They can take a laptop that they know is authentic and say it's Russian created and suppress information for a year. They can partner with Twitter to suppress information about it. They can go do the Russian collusion. They can turn the Secret Service into a private retrieval service for the Biden family, whether it's a lurid missing diary of Ashley Biden or it's an illegally gotten gun thrown in a dumpster of Hunter, or a laptop that was left and abandoned at a computer repair shop. They can go after the repairman and try to destroy his life. That's what the Secret Service does when it's politicized.
Totally forgot about that diary with the, daddy's showering with me. And I'm
Nothing.
thinking I'm too old. Oh,
Heck,
my
are you
gosh.
objecting to a teen, 12 or 13-year-old girl showering with her father? Are you objecting? No.
I'm very
That Joe
narrow-minded.
Biden-
You'll forgive me.
Do you remember the Secret Service, ex-Secret Service agent that wrote a memoir or a series of articles that said one of the reasons that she was reluctant to be assigned to the Biden family vice presidential detail was he had a habit of getting out of the pool naked in front of her and walking around, prancing around?
Yeah.
Something was, and then when you collate that, remember when he ran in 2020, he had to issue a series of apologies to the women that he had hugged. All the cardinal sins of the left that had just tried to destroy Kavanaugh. Joe Biden had surpassed those allegations in one week. And of course, they dealt with all of them the way that Hillary dealt with the bimbo eruptions.
Help us.
Now, Kathleen Willey, remember her cat was hung from a tree?
Terrible people. How do these people all die? Hey, Victor, before I have to read something, but just quick thing, I'm going to throw this in there. I didn't tell you ahead of time. Your quick comment, if you don't mind. James Carville lecturing Jews. Did you see the clip of him? I mean,
well, that was just old-fashioned anti-Semitism in the most crude, raw sense that the only reason Jews, the only reason they go for Trump, not the anti-Semitism, is they just want to get a tax cut. Greedy little bastard. That's what it basically was saying. I can't listen to him because every other word is "fu" blank or "shi," and he's crabby, he's angry, and for the 1 second of insight you have to put up with 10 seconds of lunacy. He's just pathetic, and he has no power. He's out. He's his basic message is, I ran Bill Clinton. Yeah, I went to the center. We did 100,000 police officers. And we balanced the budget, and we were rolling along, and then we went. I don't know what happened. The left wing took over, and we got to go back to where I was. And that's how, he's just and then there are people that were from the Clinton era that make the same message, but they're kind, logical people, like Mark Penn, the pollster. When he talks about Hillary Clinton's message and why she deviated and why the Bill Clinton message was successful. And when I say successful, remember, Bill Clinton never won 50% of the vote either, not even in the re-election. part of it. And remember, if Ross Perot had not run in 92, but even in 96, he got 9.5% of the vote. If he had not run in those two elections, it would have been very close. And even though they ran two, I mean, you can make the argument that George H.W. Bush and Bob Dole were not dynamic candidates. But still, so it wasn't a pop, but it's hard to listen to him. And this anti-Semitism, that was just, nobody said anything about it, Tucker's had people on his show that he shouldn't have had on, in the sense that, I don't know if he knew what they were going to say, but when you had Daryl Cooper basically saying that Churchill was a terrorist, and there wasn't, they mussed their hair up a little bit in Ukraine, but it wasn't really a plan, the starvation plan to kill Jews and Ukrainians. It wasn't premeditated. And, you have people like that. But, boy, they pounced on him, and maybe deservedly so. But when Carville, I didn't hear any reaction to that. Did you?
I did not.
Maybe
the reaction will be from Jewish donors. We'll say, enough of you clowns.
Yeah, and I didn't. There was also a suit at Columbia that was thrown out by a liberal judge that the students, made the argument, and you had those videos of those students being harassed when they went into the library and stuff, and that was thrown out. And so I don't know where it all goes, but the Jewish ratios at the Ivy League and places like Stanford, it's declining like this.
Yeah. Well, if I was a Jew in America today, and I'm not, but I'd be afraid, maybe afraid.
Well, we can go into Mr. Mohammed Suleiman.
Victor, let's get to Colorado via Douglas Murray, who's got a column in the recent New York Post. It's titled, "Lefties Learn How to Get Away with Martyr." And the newest martyr is the daughter of the scumbag who was Molotov cocktailing Jews in Colorado. Your thoughts about that, Victor, if you want, and broader, the martyrification of these Mangione and others by the Democrat Party.
I was on Laura Ingraham on Thursday night, just a few nights ago, and this came up. And the thing about Mr. Suleiman and his 5 children and his wife was, first of all, they were all here illegally and knowingly illegal. This came up with the ICE incident in Los Angeles and on CNN, Scott Jennings was sparring as usual with these crazy people on CNN, and they all are under the impression, the authorities in LA, the people that are sympathetic to Mr. Suleiman, that it's not a crime or an offense to be here illegally. And they always say, well, it's a civil offense. Well, it might be crossing the border inadvertently, but when you reside here illegally, usually you have to have some form of identification. And usually that identification in some ways is fraudulent. But it's still an offense. Whether it's a criminal offense or a civil offense, it is a crime to come here illegally without permission. If you don't believe that, just camp out at the LAX or SFO airport at customs for about 5 hours and see the number of people who will be taken into a room because they have no passport or they snuck on or something's wrong with something. They got in here somehow. So the point I'm making is that the left seems to think that these people, both the perpetrator and the family, have a perfect right to enter the United States on a tourist visa, extend it, and just be resident illegal aliens here. That's number one. And number two, the lawyer was just horrific that he enlisted, because no sooner was the arraignment than she started to suggest that Donald Trump was like Nazi Germany, and he was treating this would-be burner of Jews as if he was a Hitlerian figure. And what was so shocking and amoral, but that was completely opposite, that the people in Germany burned Jews, burned their bodies, sometimes burned them alive, but usually after gassing them, but they used fire to incinerate Jews. And here was Mr. Suleiman, who I would have to think, he tried to get a gun, he wouldn't, but there was some connection. He knew that there was a special emotional resonance with burning Jews, and that's what he tried to do, except the only difference between him and the satanic people at Auschwitz or Treblinka is he tried to burn them alive. and yet his lawyer was suggesting that he was a victim and that the people who were trying to stop this family, and him in particular, were somehow Hitlerian, when the Hitlerian person was him. Then we got into the second question about the family, and of course, Douglas Murray was trying to point out that the left's Pavlovian response is always, how do I feel good about myself and morally superior to the state, all the other people, by trying to always side with the person who is the so-called underdog? And how can I always do that from a safe place? So this family who was living in a smaller house, why this father was planning this by his own admission for 1 year, and who had stated in addition that he would postpone his campaign to burn Jews until his daughter graduated, because apparently that might hurt her graduation. So he was aware of the consequences on his family. We are supposed to believe that his wife and all 5 of them knew nothing about this. And we'll see. That could be possible. But there'll be an investigation. And they all will have a social media trail. And there'll be people who knew them, and there'll be testimony. And we'll see. But even if there isn't direct knowledge of it, and they knew about it, then they're still here illegally, just as in Los Angeles. Even if the ICE was not arresting cartel members or drug dealers, they're here illegally. And if you don't believe they should be deported, then why have a border? Just say, you know what, anybody can come in and stay. Or maybe you will say that. The other larger question that Douglas Murray, I thought, very adroitly explored in that article was, this is not unique to Mr. Soliman. They have a rogues gallery, the left does. So they took Abrego Garcia, and they sent him back. That was very smart, as John Yoo pointed out, that the Trump people said, you know what, we're not going to argue anymore that he was ordered to deport. He's already been adjudicated, and the only reason that he didn't go back to El Salvador, he made this preposterous claim that he would be in danger because the cartel was threatening his grandmother. So let's just bring the blank back, and we'll have a real inquiry into who he is. And we don't even have to prove the obvious, that he's an M13 gang member. We don't have to prove the obvious, that he struck his wife, threatened to kill her. She thought threatened to kill her, and broke his kid's computer. We don't have to prove any of that. And we don't have to even prove that some of his co-conspirators said that he was the reason the cartel was after him because he was indirectly involved with a hit on one of their grandmothers. And that might have been, we don't have to do any of that. Let's just look back at, he was in a car with 8 illegal aliens, speeding, breaking the law, and the car was registered to a known trafficker. And he did that. And now it's alleged, we learn that he really never was a Maryland man, family man, construction, upstanding. He was a trafficker. That's what the allegation says. And the co-conspirators, and I think I heard his lawyer say something like, well, these are core conspirators and they have something. Yes, that's the system that you use yourself. That is what everybody uses. You try to get evidence by a lighter sentence. So don't attack necessarily an institution. They can be true, they can be false, these testimonies, but it depends on to the degree they can be corroborated. But apparently some of the people in league with him are going to testify that he was a trafficker and a lead in the trafficking operation. And if that's true, he's no longer a Maryland man, but that doesn't stop them. He's a cause celeb because they think Donald Trump look bad. So all of the left-wing pieties, you don't touch women. This guy is a woman beater. You don't endanger children. This guy smashed possessions of his own children. This guy woke his wife up in the night to beat her. This guy was a gang member. This guy was a human trafficker. This guy trafficked women and minors. These were all Nancy Pelosi emotional. We did it for the children. I'm voting for the children. It's for the children. No, you're not. This guy is public enemy number one. If half these things, the latest, are proved. So they have idolized him because they think he's an underdog, and they've idolized Mr. Soleimani, the anti-Semite Jew burner. And now they did it with Luigi Mangione, the assassin. This is a premeditated murderer who set up a middle-class guy who worked himself up to an executive, and he blew him apart, and he premeditated it. And because he was good looking, and because he was kind of left wing, and he came from a good family, and he wore nice clothes, and he was kind of hip, they have made him into a lionized character. And they have no idea what the public thinks about all of this. But I hope that there is the ghost of Lee Atwater still floating around at midterm time, because it would be a wonderful commercial to show Luigi Mangione with a little description for a second or two, and Mohammed Suleiman with his shouting his anti-Semitic epithets it was kind of like an ad hoc jerry-rigged flamethrower that he had, a hose and stuff, and have a little clip of him, and then have a clip of Abrego Garcia, and put all of them there in the car with the traffickers and say, these are the heroes of the left. And then I would juxtapose those scenes of 10,000, 8,000 people storming the border each day and said, this is what you want, this is what you're going to get in the midterm.
Yeah, and folks in L.A. Attacking ICE
Yes,
cops.
attacking the things, and maybe we could have a nice outburst from Representative Bowman letting off the fire alarm, or we could have Miss Tlaib addressing a crowd that stormed the rotunda, which sort of got the January 6 people in big trouble.
Yeah.
Or we could have Jasmine Crockett rant about white people. And there's a whole menagerie you could bring up, and I hope they have people that will remind us what it was like.
Like the word menagerie. That's terrific, Vic. That's terrific. A bunch of animals. All right. We've got one or two more quick topics to talk about on this episode as we head around the home turn. We're recording the day of the Belmont, so head around the home turn into the stretch, and we'll talk quickly about California high-speed rail project and the FBI and Roman Catholics, and Hollywood and Roman Catholics. And we'll do that when we come back from these final important messages. If you want to drop extra pounds, boost energy levels, or reduce swelling in your legs and feet, then this message is for you. Pure Health Research is on a mission to make America healthy again. And two of their best-selling health supplements are leading the way. First is Liver Health Formula. Over 100 million Americans have a sluggish liver riddled with fatty deposits. This can kill your metabolism, pile on the pounds, and make you feel tired. Liver Health Formula takes care of all that. It supports thriving liver health with special nutrients like artichoke extract and milk thistle. This is one of the easiest ways to slim down and revitalize your energy levels. Next is lymph system support. If you struggle with fluid buildup or swelling in your legs, ankles, or feet, this is for you. This natural ingredient in lymph system support helps gently flush extra fluid and toxins out of your body. And right now, for a limited time, you can get 35% off Liver Health Formula and Lymph System Support, along with all 50-plus health supplements Pure Health Research has to offer. Head over to purehealthresearch.com and use the coupon code VICTOR at checkout. That's purehealthresearch.com with the coupon code VICTOR to save 35% on your order today. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor, spend just a little bit on this, if you don't mind, and I do mean little, on the high-speed rail project, which we know these massive Stonehenge on crack monster things are near your actual home, the train to nowhere. Well, the Trump administration, I don't know if they've done it now between when we're talking and when this podcast is airing, but the Secretary of Transportation, oh my God, Duffy said we're going to cut off.
Sean Duffy,
we're going to cut it off. No federal aid. They were counting on billions to this high-speed rail project. And without that, Victor, I do not see how they can lay a single mile of track.
I live on a particular avenue where 5 miles away it shut down our avenue, as I said, for 4 or 5 years. Now, when you go over the overpass, you look down and there's the bed established, but there's not 1 foot of rail after, I guess it's from its inception. It's about now, boy, it's over 10 or 12 years. The original cost was something like 40 billion. Now it's estimated at 300 to 400 million to go from Los Angeles through Tehachapi all the way up to Sacramento with a lateral, basically where Los Banos is, to get into the Bay Area. And remember, everybody voted for this Bay Area idea. Then the Bay Area County said, not in my backyard. You're not going to build it here. You go down to those rustic yokels in the San Joaquin Valley. They're broke. They'll bite it up. So they came up with the idea of about 150 miles from Bakersfield to Merced. I think you listening, many of you don't know where Merced is. You haven't heard of it. You may have heard of Bakersfield, but it's not a high traffic. So some of the preliminary estimates have already showed that if somebody right now was to fly down from another planet and say, here is a brand new completed high-speed rail line from Bakersfield to Merced. It's all paid for. It's yours. It would lose hundreds of millions of dollars over it because it wouldn't be profitable. Because no one who can get in a car and drive a little over 2 hours at 70 miles an hour, even on a decrepit freeway, would get on this thing. And from what we've seen about who operates the BART system and the unions and the light rail in LA, would you really want to be on this new experimental technology, given the people who would probably direct it and run it, because they're going to be incompetent? And it's way over. It's about $20 billion. So now the question is, what do you do with it? And what they did, Jack, so everybody knows, is they deliberately took high trafficked areas and built those overpasses first. So the 99 is bumper to bumper between Sacramento and Bakersfield. So when you see the Fresno thing, it's well over 2 or 3 miles of going over the skyline of Fresno. And then Highway 41 has, it's a 4-lane highway, and now they have that to show everybody. And they've done that. So the idea was, we're going to show everybody that it's all ready to go. But what they didn't show you was the real system in between those cities, and it's nothing. And then the other thing is, they went into an area of Kings County that is the most picturesque, beautiful farmland in the world. It has ancestral oaks, and they went right through it. And they had to pay top dollar. I'm talking about millions of dollars of eminent domain and legal cost. They put businesses out of, family, multi-generational businesses in Fresno out of business. They paid hundreds of millions of dollars to buy the rights, and it's parallel to the Amtrak. And the idea was, you can't use the Amtrak right away because it's so fast that you have to have a line that, the curves they would derail it. And then the bridges they're not fabricated or engineered to hold a regular passenger train. So there's no use, is what I'm trying to say to everybody. I'm kind of exasperated because I can't even imagine you would spend $30 billion and you would build Stonehenge, and then people would say, okay, you destroyed all these farms. So you had a guy with 500 acres, and he had to get across to his peach orchard from his plum orchard. He had to drive 9 miles to the underpass, and we paid him $8 or $9 million for the land that we destroyed. And we destroyed all these ancestral oaks that if you took a chainsaw, you'd be in jail. We did all this stuff. We put all these people out of business, and now we can't use it. We can't use it for trains. We can't use it for freeways. And how much is it going to cost to blow it up? I don't know. Or are you just going to leave it there as a reminder, like Stonehenge, of a primitive society that once lived here?
Charlton Heston at the end of Planet of the Apes with the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, it's going to be like a Mycenaean Tyrans or Mycenae. We're all going to
Easter Island.
Well, who is that civilization that built that? It's going to be here forever.
Yeah.
These people, I don't know how government, if they're corrupt or stupid, but who goes to work for them? And I say that not in a condemnatory passage, because I can tell you, when I was growing up, Jack, the most brilliant people you'd meet were things like Caltrans engineers and California Water Project designers and architects. I mean, they built that massive California aqueduct, and they got it from inception to implementation in 5 or 6 years. That San Luis Dam is beautifully engineered. You go up to the Big Creek project of Huntington, Florence Lake, Edison Lake, Huntington Lake, Shaver Lake. It's just like a genius. And that was a private enterprise Henry Huntington project. But what I'm getting at is, I don't know what happened to our generation, but it's stupid. It's incompetent. And we're kind of like Dark Age Greeks from about 1200 BC to 700. We're kind of wandering around. Who are these guys that did it? Who were they? Maybe we'll call them Apollo and Ajax and Achilles, these heroes, because we'll make myths about them. Oh my gosh, they built the aqueduct. Well, how do you fix it? I don't know how you fix it. Well, how do you run it? I don't know how you run it. Well, how do you do anything? I don't know. There was a race of demigods, and they're all dead now, but they're mythological creatures like centaurs or something, and they did this. But we don't know who they are. But we only know that they were horrible people. They were just horrible people. They were racists and transphobes and homophobes and colonizers and expropriators. And they were horrible people, and they did all these horrible things, but we liked the horrible things they did because we like their airports and we like their aqueducts and we like their dam. We can't make them anymore. We can't even repair them. That's what we are.
Oh, well, every month will be Pride Month. Hey, Victor, one last topic.
It is Pride Month, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Two Catholic stories. One is that Senator Grassley has uncovered much evidence, far flung from what we originally believed, about the FBI under Joe Biden investigating Catholics, because traditional Catholics who worship like they were potential terrorists, and that was out of the Richmond FBI office. It was an infamous memo, but turns out it was circulated. Yeah, well, we believe. It was circulated to over 1,000 employees and discussed by other field offices in cities including Milwaukee and Louisville. So this crap that Christopher Wray said, kind of like was an isolated thing, and he didn't say he was one lunatic, but that was the impression. It was just, this was a much germinating issue within the FBI to see practicing Roman Catholics as a threat to the country. Then one other thing, Victor, if I may spring on you, there's a Apple TV show. I don't watch it. It's called Your Friends and Neighbors. It stars John Hamm. And they just had an episode out the other day where he and a woman character enter a Catholic church, and they go to the tabernacle where we Catholics believe that the consecrated host that we believe is the actual body of Jesus Christ. This is what we believe. He took it out, and then he dipped it in jam, and there's just a desecration.
He did a Gretchen Whitmer thing.
Worse, because she did a Dorito chip, but he was taking an actual host. Well, it filmed it. And Victor, I can't. What does Apple think? What does Apple corporate Apple?
I don't know.
Think?
I mean, why do they hate? Why do they hate? They're kind of like Robespierre and the cult of the divine being, or the radio. Even Robespierre and the Jacobins said that there was some value in religion, even though they tried to destroy it. They killed over 6,000 Catholics, the Jacobins did, but they hate religion, and they hate. I think they hate the behavior. They don't like people who are religious and live by the 10 Commandments and are civil and traditional. They just don't like them. And they feel that all of their aberrant and alternate lifestyles and behaviors are what makes life diverse and interesting, I guess.
Yeah. Even though we buy their Apple phones and buy their Apple computers, that they're still... I wonder if they wanted to be edgy, would John Hamm on his show take a Quran and burn it or step on it? And
it's very funny. I would tell another of my father's stories. He drops me off at UC Santa Cruz. I mentioned he went in the bathroom once, and there was people in coitus. But it was so crazy when he dropped me off at the dorm. So I came home Thanksgiving, and my mom said, well, how's everything going at the dorm? And I mentioned all these crazy things. I had a roommate who had spears, arrows, swords, and told me that he was going to execute me.
What?
Yeah, he
Really?
did. I put his head in the window and closed it and put a belt. I was a wrestler in high school, so I could protect myself. He turned out to be, they threw him out. They put him in a mental ward. I would visit him. I actually liked him, but we had a knockdown, drag-out fight. But he turned out to be a very good person. Years later, I met him. Anyway, and then there was a guy there were people shooting flaming arrows from the dorm at people. I would walk to class, and there was a big hollow in a redwood tree with this young girl without shoes or anything but kind of a sheet, which she lived in the hollow. So you'd see her, and she'd like wave to you from the tree. And it just, then I would see the SDS
like
big rallies. they had this amphitheater, and they were always saying during the camp, burn it down, let it down. And then this woman who would yell all these things, I was driving down, and she was hitchhiking with this designer luggage. And she asked me if I would take her to this, in this broken down car I had, to the San Jose airport, which is a real long way away. And I said no. And she said something to the effect, well, it's not the San Jose airport that you use, meaning it was a private jet. And anyway, I was telling at Thanksgiving, my mom was trying to make sense of it. My dad just sat back and said, well, what he's trying to tell you, Pauline, is that he went to the Fresno Zoo. And he saw the giraffe and the zebra, and he saw the lion, and he saw the hippo, and it's the same thing. He's been at a zoo the whole time. I don't know what I hope he didn't feed the lions or something. He doesn't get in the cage with them, but he's been at the zoo. Simple as that. That's all there is to it.
It was a menagerie. And
he
this was a relatively brand new school, too.
It was brand new. It had only been opened when I got there 5 years. My brother was older. He went there. He was only 4 years, I think. And the weird thing about it was they had raided the Ivy League school junior faculty, right, who wanted to break away from traditionalism. So I was like this country hick, and I met this wonderful professor, John Lynch, and he was a classicist. And he said, I was taking his Western Civ required course. He said, you write good essays. Why don't you study Greek and Latin? I said, what? And the point I'm making is, for all this hippie stuff, I had Yale, Harvard trained people who were trained by the old group, not the hippies. So they were the most famous philologists in the world, had been their professors. So they knew Greek and Latin like English, and they taught us. They were very disciplined. So when I got to Stanford University in the PhD program, even though some of my contemporaries had prep school, Latin and Greek, I had as good or better Greek and Latin because I was doing composition in undergraduate. We write in Latin and Greek. So I look back at that, and yes, it was crazy. But that particular seam I got a wonderful education, and they corrected all your essays minutely, and they were some of the best professors in the world. But the whole climate was crazy. It was insane. And I only got in one really bad, except for my roommate, fight, was when I was walking down with a couple of guys. We wanted to watch this demonstration. They were walking from the campus down to the courthouse to demand that there be a moratorium on something because Nixon bombed Cambodia or something. Everybody said to me, hey, there's going to be a lot of girls walking down there, and some of them will probably go topless. So there's about 5 of us, and we were kind of misfits from the valley. There was a guy from Merced, a guy from Stockton. So we were kind of just walking along parallel to them. And they got by. The campus had cows, because it was grazing. It had 22,000 acres. So they would rent it out to livestock farmers. And they got next to these cows, and they started, free the cows, liberate them from domestic tyranny. And so they went over and they started to push down the post and let these cows who had been slaughtered on the road. So we were all from kind of rural areas, and we, grew up. So we said, if you do that again, we're going to beat them. And we started pushing, and that's where I got the term spaghetti arms. A guy said to me about Antifa, he said, this is going to be easy because these people are spaghetti arm terrorists. But the point I'm making is it was a raucous, crazy time to be at that place. But when I look back at it, it's so baffling because juxtaposed to that hippie counterculture, if you just went to class and you picked the right professors, there were some brilliant professors there, and I got really well trained in classics. And when I went to graduate school, I got all the coursework done in 2.5 years. It's because of them. And it was really good. I mean, I went in there, and the first day, the chairman of the graduate PhD program said, well, have you read any Euripides? I said, yeah, 9 plays. Have you read Sophocles? Yeah, 4 plays. Have you read Aeschylus? 6 plays. Have you read Herodotus? Half of it. You read Thucydides? 3 books. And then they had a test to place composition as a graduate PhD. And he said, well, you haven't had composition, so everybody has to write in Latin Greek on this test, and it will tell us whether you're exempt. And so I took it, and he called me back in and said, you got everything right. I said, so I don't have to take it? And he said, no. That was just verbiage. You're going to take every composition class. And I was so happy I did, because the teachers that taught us composition were brilliant, and I learned even better how to write Latin and Greek, which helps you read Latin and Greek. But
all moot now if you're getting your PhD at Princeton.
Oh, you don't have to know Greek. And then in graduate school, I have a soft spot for Stanford University, because of the professors I had. They were from Austria and England and Germany, and they were all philologists, and they were no nonsense. You know what I mean? You couldn't go in class and said, I was depressed last night. I didn't read 1,200 lines of Sophocles. No. There was ding, 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 ding. And they turned out some very accomplished classicists out of that program. And today it's theory and Foucault and gender studies and no Greek and no Latin and all these programs. Sad.
Well, we hate to end on a sad note, Victor, but alas,
I was trying to be happy and upbeat about praising people that were in these menageries.
I think people are upbeat hearing that you stuck someone's head in a window.
I only did that for survival, because I called my dad and I said, this guy says he's going to hit me when I'm asleep.
Yeah.
And he's got all these weapons. And he said, you're a wrestler. Don't get in a boxing match, because he may not know how to box. Just wrestle him. Take him down, put his head in the window, and put your belt around it, and he can't get out. And then tell him not to do it anymore. And he said, don't go tell the deans there. They're just as bad as the students. They won't do anything. And my mom said something about vigilantism and all this.
Your dad was a college administrator, so he knew how to handle these situations.
He had a problem as
fisticuffle.
He was also 6'4", 120 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on, but I would say his mission in life was to intervene when he saw some bully picking on someone. And he did that quite a lot in my life. And some of it was really good, but some of it was a little bit, because you didn't know if the person was armed or something,
Yeah.
He'd always say something to the effect, you really like doing this to people, then why don't we just settle it now? And I wasn't as big as he was, so when he said, why don't you settle? And the person I'm talking about was 6'3", and he was a hippie, and he was a very nice person. He was not well. He was taking massive amounts of drugs. And after we did this knockdown fight, and I think got the best of it, then we sat down. I said, do you want to do this every night, or do you want to be friends? If you want to be friends, you got to get all the weapons out. And then shortly after that, they incarcerated him in the mental hospital. And I dutifully visited him 3 or 4 times a week. In fact, I did something I should confess I feel bad about. You couldn't bring in anything because it was a padded room, top floor place. But he loved Taco Bell. And he said, Victor, if you really like me, would you bring in burritos, the beef bean burrito, and I would get about 4 of them and then hitchhike over there and put them in my coat, and then I'd give him burritos. I liked him, and I'll just tell you, his first name was Jack, and he was a wonderful person, but we had it out, and he terrified me for my first quarter there. And then he was gone. He was gone.
By the way,
disappeared.
You talking about your father before, I would never tell you this. Whenever you talk about him, I have an image of like John Wayne. I just...
Yeah, you know what? It was funny. He reminded me of Bill Holden, the Wild Bunch. He was the same type of talking like that. Yeah, he was very sweet to people, though. I don't want to give the impression he was brutish. He was every time anybody has bumped into me, they always say what a sweet person he was and how kind he was and how upbeat he was. But I don't think you can fly at 20, 21, 40 missions, over Tokyo.
Yeah.
And 9 hours in a cramped B-29, 9 hours back, crash in Iwo Jima twice, and lose 14 of your 16 planes and be normal. And the stuff he would tell us when he had a couple of drinks, that they gave him, amphetamines to keep them up and kind of sleeping pills to get them. And then he had my sinus. I inherited it from him, and he had sinus infections with the altitude, and they would give him sulfa powder. He'd sniff all the time. I don't know. I think he went through and then his brother, first cousin, was adopted, was killed, and I think he had a lot of. I worshipped him. I still do.
Oh, you
my mother. I won the
worshipable.
lottery with parents. Both of them. I just feel.
Well, we'll all meet them someday.
I hope
in a better place.
I believe so. Yeah, I was very lucky, though. I would look back at it, and everybody thinks not everybody looks fondly on their parents.
Yes, I know that.
Especially my generation. They blame all of their imperfections or disappointments on a parent's culpability. And it is true that Depression, World War II generation was pretty tough. But they were tough mostly in a good sense, is my...
Yeah.
He would walk in, last story, on a Saturday, we'd work after school, and it would be like 5 o'clock on Saturday. And we had been, I don't know, working with my grandfather, picking up walnuts, chainsaw, and then we would sit down like 2 hours before dinner. And so he'd walk in and say, okay, this is the old men's retirement club, and you're in your soft little recliner chair, and you think life is just sort of relaxing. And we're not done with it. Sergeant First Class William Hanson has the orders on the door, and they're spelled out in detail, Victor. So you go there and it'd say, Victor, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Replace shingles on top of roof. Victor, I want you to hose down patio. Victor, go out and pull weeds out of driveway. And then he'd have the time frame, 5 o'clock, finished 5:30. And it was kind of a joke. He wasn't a martinet at all.
Yeah.
He was a work. That's what that whole Swedish culture. That was the thing that was weird about it. Kingsburg, California. They work. I don't think anybody ever worked like those people. Kind of drove my mom crazy. They were just workaholics. Go to a funeral. Yeah, he died. You go home. Yeah, he's dead. Yeah, he worked hard. No, he never slept. Yeah, he was working hard. He was a good man. He paid his bills. He worked hard. It was work, 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 work.
This will be the last episode you and I talk about before Father's Day, so this is a good way. You found a good way to
it was
bring
timely because I
line.
always think of him all the time. But I think of him all the time, every day, actually, and I'm 71. I have been doing that for a while. I miss him terribly. It's really... But, it's kind of sad. I'm 71. I act like a kid. I miss my parents.
It's a blessing.
And I had great-grandparents, too.
Yeah, it's a blessing.
I was very lucky. I feel like anything I've accomplished was due to them.
Well, you frequently attest to their wonderfulness. So don't I don't know anyone who so publicly shows respect for their parents as you do. Victor, we're going to close it out here, except for me to say thank you to the folks that go to civilthoughts.com, sign up. Put your name in there, put your email address. You sign up for Civil Thoughts, which is the free weekly email newsletter I write for the Center for Civil Society, and it gives you 14 recommended readings, comes into your inbox every Friday. It's free, and we're not selling your name. I know you'll like it. Civil Thoughts, go there and sign up. Thanks for those that do. Thanks for everybody who has...
And Jack, comments. Just as a final reminder, we're going to go through a lot of our questions next time, right?
I asked the good people at the Victor Davis Hanson fan club at Facebook to send in questions, and I got a ton of questions. So
great.
We're going to record.
I haven't seen them yet, but I will answer them.
Well, okay, I'll show you in a bit. So we're going to have about 2 or 3 episodes of Victor's recovery episodes
It won't even be a recovery. It'll be a blink.
Okay. Victor's blink
I got to be careful of hubris because Nemesis will hit me, but I expect to recover very quickly.
Well, thanks, Victor.
I got a wonderful ENT surgeon. He's really good. He did it last time, and he's brilliant. Dr. Jerome Hester of Menlo Park. I shouldn't advertise that, but he's a great guy. He really is. If you have an ENT problem, I would go to him.
I hope St. Blaise is watching out with him on the fateful day.
I wanted to be a Sanctus Naso, but you said he doesn't exist.
Yeah, it just doesn't. Victor, thanks very much. Thanks, folks, for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.